Hi, all, and welcome to the Found Artist Files, the podcast that delves into real stories that inspire, uplift, and remind you that no matter who you are, your story matters. Every journey, no matter how big or how small, is worth celebrating. Here, we'll explore the powerful narratives of everyday people, artists, creators, and dreamers just like you, sharing the struggles, triumphs, and lessons learned along the way. So keep going, keep creating, and remember, you're crafting your own unique path, one story at a time. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for listening. Today on this episode, we have Violette Trotter with us. Hi, Violet.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
Do you want to share a little bit more about what it is that you do in the industry?
Sure. Yeah, no, I work primarily as a casting director. My background mainly lies in real people casting. So, as opposed to like hiring actors, I do a lot of street scouting or online scouting to bring people that really fit within the world of a film into a film. On top of that, I also work as a producer, and mainly I'm trying to focus on bringing stories that maybe we haven't seen within the film industry yet, and really representing people that have not been represented. So, yeah, that's a bit about what I do.
Awesome. And what drew you to casting, and how did you find your way into the industry?
Kind of crazy, I would say. I was working at a movie theater. I was specifically working as a movie theater janitor and wanted to have a job that was more creatively fulfilling. And while I was working at this movie theater, I was, surrounded by film people all the time. It was a theater that specifically would have people coming in to do Q&As for independent films. So at the time we were showing Red Rocket and had Sean Baker in and Come On Come On. And there was just kind of this sense of I wanted to do something bigger than what I was currently doing, and casting kind of felt like a pivot for me that made sense, because I had come from more of an acting background, and the world of casting is very much, you have to be reading with people and making people comfortable in the room, and I felt like it just made sense for me to pivot that way. And I had a friend who I had met when I was a bit younger who was working in casting, and I spoke with her about potentially doing an internship. And she was like, actually, we have an opening right now if you want to come and just see what it's like and see if it makes sense for you. And basically, in December of 2021, went in and helped with a few in-person castings and was just so in awe of what was happening and loved being in the room with everybody and getting to see the work of specifically non-actors that had been street scouted and was their reader for different scenes. And it was from there that I was just kind of fell in love with it and knew that I wanted to continue on doing that.
Yeah, no, and it's so amazing to feel that way about casting, to have that sort of calling and draw to something from a creative aspect. Mm-hmm. So casting is such a unique mix of creativity, of intuition, and really research, right? So how do you even approach casting?
I guess it really depends on the project, because I would say where I am currently, I really do two different facets of casting. I'm either brought onto a project to cast a really specific type that is, maybe something that is more difficult or requires a lot of research, especially for when we're casting a real person role. For instance, I would say recently there's a role that I was casting that was a blind or low vision person and had to do a nationwide search for somebody that fit this description. Somebody who was also musically inclined. And for us, it was really about the authenticity of that character and making sure that the person that we cast not only embodied the person, but really embodied, that this is somebody who is blind. And so it was a huge research-based project of reaching out to like hundreds of organizations, schools, groups, hospitals that really facilitated to people that fit this description. And from that, and having this, flyer that we made get shared, we got all of these submissions of people who fit this role really well, and met with a bunch of people. We taped a bunch of people, and now are in kind of more finalizing stages of that. We think we found somebody that really fits this role. So there's that aspect of it, of like the really deep research-based, like me diving into like Instagram and finding people that just really fit something that way, going on hashtags and finding people that like had the same disease that this person had, because it's based off a real person, and like going through that and finding people that fit it that way. So that's one facet of casting. Another facet of casting that I do, and is more recent, is I've been brought on pretty early on in the stages of films to do specifically producing casting. So get brought on like very early on to help them find financeable talent for something. And for me, I am much more interested in, I don't want to cast the same like 12 actors that are, really up and coming right now. I'm more interested in finding people that like are financeable, but maybe we haven't seen them in something in a long time, or kind of thinking outside of the box and finding people that would be able to secure financing. So with producing, like I've done that a lot for a few different features recently, and then for short films as well, I like to like find people that can help them with selling the film once they bring it to a festival.
Yeah, and that's so interesting, because I'm thinking back to like when I grew up, I heard a casting call on like the radio when I went, and that was how that was like my experience growing up from like a casting. And so it's so funny to hear just like someone who takes such a different approach to wanting it to be such fresh faces, and for it to be like really authentic to the role. So it's funny to see like the shift from like a mass casting to like someone who's actually doing research and wanting it to be like very more specific and aligned with the character and to the story itself.
I guess like with that as well, I think that there is kind of a shift in casting right now. There's a lot of people who came out of a very specific casting office called JV8, and I think like we're gonna see this more so within the industry. I would say there's just so many people that like came out of that office that started their own companies, and like that's how I was trained, was through like real people casting. And I think that really this is going to be way more prevalent in the next few years.
Yeah. And you've mentioned that you're such an advocate for fresh faces and like street scouting. How do you even know how to approach them like on the street? Is it like an aura? Is it a personal appearance? Like what really draws you to them? Like what are you feeling when you look at them?
I think like for myself, I'm always looking for if somebody has a more interesting look, or specifically, maybe this is like bad to say, but if they don't have any plastic surgery, I am very
so authentic. Perfect.
I don't want to sound like bad. But yeah, I just, especially I've been brought on to cast a lot of like older people, and finding people who like look like they could be like my grandmother or the grandmother of my friends. I like just somebody who looks like they have a story to them. For younger people as well, I love people who really express themselves through their hair, or if they have a lot of tattoos or piercings, or just if they have a face that's just really unique. I am always drawn to that. And I think when approaching somebody on the street, and I've gotten, rejected so many times, I feel like it's good like exposure therapy. for if you're quite shy, which I definitely used to be. I think it's a thing of approaching it, and if they seem interested, pursuing it, but if they are not interested, not forcing it upon them, I would say, because you don't want people to get scared, or for people to, not trust people. Like, I think it's a thing of being open with them, saying, look, this is what I do. You can look me up online. Like, I'm legit.
I'm not scamming you.
I'm not scamming you. I've had many instances where this has been, quite bad. Of people thought I was an ICE agent one time, which is quite bad. Or like, yeah, it's tough, but I think just really explaining, it's really like about pitching the film as well, and saying like, I'm doing this particular project and we're looking for somebody who is exactly like you. You are the fit to this solution, and would you be interested in this? And I can send you more information. Yeah.
How important are first impressions?
I think first impressions, if you're street scouting, are everything, and you can't come off too strong to somebody because you will scare them away. I will also say there's so many people that I've met for the first time through street scouting or through online scouting somebody that I met in person and they were completely different, or I met a second or third time through doing a callback with them and they presented themselves completely different. So I really think like a first impression of somebody is not an indicator of who that person really is. I think a first impression is who that person wants to be perceived as from themselves. And then once you get to know them better, then that's who that person really is in their core.
So how does who they are as a human being play into them auditioning for a role?
I think it's usually for like the specific projects that I do, it's a lot of them are based out of like having something, being part of a very specific community or having a very specific job. And so if somebody has the job that the character does, like there was a film I did a while ago where I lived out in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for a period of time, and there's a character that they wanted to authentically cast that was a motel manager. And so I went to all of the open motels in February in Myrtle Beach, and we ended up meeting this woman named Norma Jean who was perfect for it, who had told us that in the past she always wanted to be an actress. We're like, oh, this is great. She's so like real. She was like very like Southern and had grown up in Alabama and moved up to North Carolina or South Carolina at a certain point, and was just perfect for this. But it was just, I guess, for in that aspect of that was her job, was she was a motel manager, and so she fit perfectly for that capacity. But for, I guess, when it's part of a specific community, it's more so about, for the director, if this person embodies the community that they are trying to represent, I would say. And for, I guess, in that aspect, like, I will bring way more options of people from that community that we've done through research, and then they can the director and producers can narrow it down from there of, okay, this person totally reminds me of my sister that I grew up with and totally embodies the character, and this person, even though they are part of this community, doesn't quite embody the vision that I had.
Okay, so going back to like the directors and producers, how do you even discuss characters with them?
Usually from the beginning, I will ask for breakdowns from them of just, specifically, what are you looking for? And I also ask them for photo references of just physically, what do you want this person to look like? If it's for something that is more of a street cast, real person approach. And from there, it gives me a better idea of visually what they're looking for, and then at the core, who that person is. And from there, with all the research, and usually I'll have like, you know, find people on Instagram and such that like fit that character. I will also usually put breakdowns up on stuff like breakdown services and casting networks as well, just so that we can get like a really big range of people. Because sometimes there are people that have like little to no acting experience that are on websites like that like are just looking for something to like break them into an industry, and like the role just is them. But yeah, I guess that's kind of like the initial for when it's more of a real person casting thing. And then for something where it's early on in a process and it's more of a producing project where we're looking for a financeable name, I will always, you know, ask them, give me a list of who you want. And I can go through your list and tell you with your budget size, with, you know, what you're looking for this, what makes the most sense, what will help you sell the film. And so that's, I guess, from an early on process, we do that. And then for people like very early on in the process, we usually don't audition them. It's usually offer only. And so we go make an offer, and if they're interested, we attach them, and usually raise more financing based off of the attachment. So,
Have you ever had any differences with the team?
oh man, yes, I have, definitely. There have been also projects that I have had very specific feelings about, who I think should be cast. There's one film in particular, where I had very, very specific feelings about, like, really loving these two women for it and really pushing for them. And it was between, for this project, it was between two women who had no acting experience and two women who were actors. And I was pushing for the two women who didn't have any acting experience because they just felt so real to me and so authentic, and I loved them together. They had, like, also such interesting faces that I had not seen on screen. I was like, I want them both. They're so good. And I fought for them till the end, and neither of them got cast. But I still recommend them to other projects that I think that they would fit, because I loved both of them. And then also on the producing side, like, there are ideas that I have that I, like, when reading a script, I'm like, oh, this is so this person, and I would love to see them in this, and then bringing it to them, they're like, no, we don't want that. Like, but I think the biggest thing I would say is, you know, sometimes I have an idea of a character, and my idea of the character is not necessarily the same as what the director wants. And so it's important to really tailor my idea to what they want, because at the end of the day, I don't make the decisions.
Have you ever felt that, like, an actor's presence for a role, even though they don't really match the description, like that this person, you were like, okay, I feel like through whether scouting on the street or through an audition tape, that you're just like, okay, I feel like this person is going to do an amazing job for a role that is not necessarily the description of the role, but really does depict this character's, whether it's characteristics or whether it's just embodies the role different from the actual appearance?
Yeah, I mean, there have been many instances where we've just auditioned a bunch of people, and someone who kind of came out of left field ended up getting the role. There was a film that I was casting, I think this was like 2 years ago, that we auditioned like all of these different people, and we had this kind of picture of this person that they were kind of, oh my gosh, I don't know how to describe this properly, but they were almost like cartoon-like. And I guess the way that this person was, they were like basically a rabid fan of a director, and they were not like scary though. They were just very like they were supposed to be very pathetic. And we had this person audition who gave one of the scariest auditions I've ever seen, where they were so, like, honest to, like, being very, very, like, they needed to gain the approval of this person. And it, like, it was very, like, it felt like Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver kind of energy of this person, which was so not what we were looking for this. And it changed the whole idea of how we thought about that character of, oh my god, like, this is not, like, a pathetic guy. This guy could be really scary. And that, I think, makes this film way more interesting if this person feels dangerous. And it like, added this whole other layer to this character where we had a lot of people come in and they were giving almost like a failed stand-up comic kind of energy, and then there was this person that was like, gave one of the best auditions I've ever seen in my whole life because it was so real and so not who this person is as well. But it, like, completely changed our idea of the character, and we ended up casting them in the film.
And so did you also, like, change what the script was a little bit based on just, like, this person's audition?
Yes. I think from what I remember, there was tailoring to the dialogue based off of what they gave. And, like, this is one specific instance that I remember very vividly, but there have been other times when, you know, we've had people come in that we had been given, like, a very specific description of what they were looking for, and then somebody just came in and blew everybody away. And it really, at the end of the day, I would say unless a role is calling for, like, a really specific ethnicity or it's, like, from a specific culture, I would say if you're an actor, like, do not apply for those roles if you don't fit that. Like, if like, you're not the specific ethnicity they're looking for. But if, for instance, the role is calling for somebody who is male and you're female, it doesn't hurt to apply to that. Or if you read a description and, you know, you feel a calling to that character, even though maybe it's not what we think we're looking for, apply anyway, because you may surprise us.
That's interesting, yeah. How does the casting process differ for, like, an independent versus more of a larger studio?
I would say for a larger studio, usually they're looking for something more commercial, unfortunately. I, from my experience, it's more so about, okay, this person has 100,000 Instagram followers. That for us is free marketing, and we should cast them based off of that. Or this is the child of a friend of mine who works in the industry, or like, it's, from my experience, it's more based around that. It's more based around like stringing along a cast of people that would bring in an audience. However, I feel like recently that model doesn't work anymore. And it is something that I think needs to be rethought, because you see there's a lot of these films where people are thinking in that way and they aren't selling. They're honestly, like, so many films from major studios are bombing because of that. And there are films that, you know, from more independent studios that have been doing exceedingly well and have been completely, like, smashing their budget. And I think when casting for either completely independently or for, like, a smaller independent studio, there's less of an impetus for that because your budget is smaller. So they're like, well, we can't afford to have some huge person anyway, so cast it more so about who is right for the role rather than who financially can help sell the film. I think that who is right for the role at the end of the day is always the better choice than who can sell the film financially, because at the end of the day, who can sell the film financially is not really working anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that you and I really talked about, like, you know, prior to this, was that really being authentic for the role. right?
Yeah.
And it's like you look at Honora and you look at Mickey Madison, who has 0 followers because she doesn't have social media, right? And they were still able to do such amazing numbers and just like a wonderful performance with it. So it really does show that Instagram numbers or that social media followers are not going to attract the turn that what these larger studios are really aiming for.
Yeah, I mean that's something I really love about Neon specifically is they're a company that time and time again they take chances on younger filmmakers, on people who are thinking outside the box, on films that have really no financeable names or no stars attached and are more interested on telling stories and telling unique stories. One of the best films that I saw in the past, like, I guess 5 years, was a film that really flew under the radar that Neon picked up after A24 passed on it. It's a film called Pleasure, and it's a film that is about the porn industry, and they completely just cast all of these real porn stars in the film. And it's a film that's like, at the end of the day, like a story of somebody who is trying to get to the top and will do anything to get there. That is like the story boiled down, and it like some of the stuff that happens in this film is so horrifying and really shows both sides of this industry, of that it can be a really beautiful thing when you're working with female directors and that it can be a very scary thing when working in the wrong environment. And that's a film that they took because they believed in that film. They believed that this was a story that needed to be told. Same with Honora. That's another one. Sean is an amazing director, has been like a legend in the industry for years, and that was a film that after they finished it, they bought the rights to that film. I think it's also evident in just like the films that have won the Palme d'Or, like the past, I think like 5 or so years. They've all been films from Neon. I think that their taste is just so strong, and they're, wanting to take these chances on people because they believe the stories are good over anything else. I think that that is what people should be focusing on, is telling stories, finding people that, really resonate with an audience, or telling a story that reflects what is happening in the world right now, over specifically, let's remake this thing because it did well X amount of years ago. I think the new stories is what people are looking for, and that is what people are going out and seeing. It's not these remakes, it's not, the franchise sequels, it's the new stories, it's the interesting stories, it's the stories that, are touching. That's what people want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's you feel so much more from these independent films, and that's the big shift that we're also seeing, right? Is that a lot of the honestly the tech industry, because that is who's running our media right now, is that the tech industry are just doing a ton of remakes and a ton of sequels or things like that, or big action and big budget. And so the one thing that at least I've noticed, and that a lot of people have noticed too, is that these tech companies are removing the feeling from art. And so that's
Yeah.
why having more independent films, you really do unite people together, because you bring those feelings, you bring those emotions, you bring back the stories that the 90s, that the early 2000s were like all about. And they really did. People loved them. I loved the movies growing up.
Oh yeah, this is something like I've actually talked to my boyfriend about this recently, where we were watching like a string of these movies. We watched Stand By Me and Perks of Being a Wallflower recently, and we were just like, they don't make movies like this anymore.
Don't.
Like
I
I
know.
feel like I sound like I sound so like bad saying that, I guess, of like I feel like old or something, but I'm like, they just don't invest the time into these movies anymore. And like seeing a movie like Stand By Me, that's a movie that I think the only two people I recognized in that film, obviously you have River Phoenix and Corey Feldman's in that film, but that was, I think, the first film both of them were in, or very early on in their career. And other than them, you have like Kiefer Sutherland and John Cusack, who at the time were like really up and coming stars, but the leads of this film were all unknown kids. And the love that they have for each other in that film is so palpable and so real. And, like, seeing that film, just, like, no one's making stuff like this anymore. Like, it's so sad. Same thing with kids' films as well. I have a brother who is 8, and just the stuff they are pumping out for kids his age now is so bad and so dumbed down. It's crazy. It's like they don't see children as humans. They see them as, like, not, I don't even know, but I've been trying to show him stuff that, like, I grew up with, like a lot of the Studio Ghibli films, and there's this Leica is a company that also did some, like, really great animation, claymation, and all of the, like, Wallace and Gromit stuff. I, like, want to kind of put him onto stuff that I think is much better than what is being pumped out right now. It's so bad. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so lucky that I grew up with, like, Disney, with Pixar, and they were just, like, movie after movie was just, like, such a hit. And I remember growing up, like, my grandpa, like, loved films, and he used to say, when I was growing up, he was like, they don't make films like they did when I was growing up. And it's so funny to, like, just see, like, the evolution of the film industry. And I mean, growing up with him, we used to watch, like, Hitchcock was, like, his favorite director, and so we watched. I mean, I know all of his movies that we just, like, constantly watch on repeat, and then to see even the remakes of his movies, right, into the 2000s, and now I'm like, now it's just kind of shifted completely away from more independent or original voices to being such more bigger blockbusters and things like that. So I do feel that shift for sure.
It's so interesting because, like, the bigger blockbuster stuff, like, it doesn't do very well. Like, it's, you see, like, I think a really good example is this, I haven't seen it, but this Snow White movie that came out recently is one of the biggest box office bombs in, like, the past, I mean, of recent times. It's crazy. And because of that film, Disney is scrapping all of their upcoming live action features. And I think that is a really good indicator that people don't want to be seeing these films. Like, no one is asking for them. And they keep churning them out. They're not making money. I just don't understand that at all. And I think, yeah, again, there just needs to be more of a focus on, you know, telling these real stories. I think even adaptations, you know, both Stand By Me and Perks of Being a Wallflower, which we watched recently, like, those are both adaptations of really good books. And I feel like a film recently that did that was Nickel Boys. That is a really fantastic adaptation and kind of more in line with, you know, these films of the 90s and early 2000s. I think there needs to be maybe more of that, of going to a source material like a book, which then will make people more inclined to read the source material that it comes from. But yeah, less of the remakes. And
that brings up, like, the story of Carol. So Carol was actually created off of a book, but that screenplay took 20 years to write. And so it just wasn't ready for the world to see it. So that's what really took the time for it to come out. But, like, definitely with this, like, we've seen that the industry has shifted more towards, like, analytics and data to define art. But I think that every artist truly knows that it lies at the intersection of, like, inner self and intuition. Yeah. So how would you say that, like, how do you embody this?
I personally think, like, with, you know, with so much stuff getting, specifically in the arts community, being taken over by tech and being more so about manufacturing a story, I think that is so wrong and so messed up, because at the end of the day, art comes from expression, and it comes from, you know, a deeper part of yourself. So much art really comes from a lot of pain as well, from a lot of people. And I think when you're telling stories that are, you know, being generated by AI or not coming from humans, you lose, I think, a really big important thing, which is mistakes and imperfections within stories. And I think some of the best films are films that are a bit imperfect, or you notice almost like a mistake within a performance, or you get moments of improv because it comes from somebody feeling something. And I think, you know, at least for myself, I want to work on projects that make me feel something that I feel really connected to, on a human level, and not on a level of, all right, well, you know, this person who is famous is doing this project, and like I don't care about that. I've been offered a lot of projects where, you know, it's a remake of something, or it's, you know, this famous person is doing it, and unless it's a project where I read it and was like, oh wow, like this means a lot, I have said no. Because I don't care about that, honestly. I care mostly about, is it good? And is this somebody I believe in? And I think, you know, in this current climate, people should be caring more about what is getting put out there, and the quality of the work, and the realness of the work, rather than focusing on churning out the same things over and over again that from an AI algorithm they believe are going to be like whatever. But
Yeah, and kind of going back to the whole authenticity part. So when you do get a story and it's really speaking to you, and it's really you know, aligning with the message, how important is it for you to cast someone in that role that really does is authentic to that role, right? Whether it's someone who is visually impaired, or whether that's someone who is queer for the role, or someone who is you know, handicapped. Like, how important is it for the character to truly be aligned and authentic to that role?
I think if there, I was speaking with a producer about this recently, specifically on this film we were just doing that had, you know, this character that's visually impaired. We said we will not make the movie unless they are. I wholeheartedly believe that, especially for, you know, if somebody is differently abled, or if they're, you know, visually impaired, or, you know, I think the thing too with queerness as well, there was a film I worked on 3 years ago where the whole cast that we cast in this film was entirely queer. And I think for that, having that representation is so important, because there's so many films that, you know, I feel like, you know, you see something like Brokeback Mountain, and that's a film that was very pivotal at the time, but that's a film that was two straight men playing gay characters. I think now that we're in a world where, you know, a lot of rights are getting taken away, and specifically it's like we're in a time where it's the most accepted and the least accepted, like right now, because there's so much tension building. I think having queer representation in cinema, especially specifically trans representation, having trans people playing trans characters, is so important. We need to not have cis actors play trans characters. I don't want to keep seeing that. Same with, you know, for any of these other types of roles, having people who are not differently abled playing differently abled roles, or having people who are not visually impaired playing visually impaired roles. I think anyone should be able to see themselves represented on screen correctly and authentically, and if they don't, it makes people feel like they are not, you know, existing within the world. They're not existing within media. I think anybody should be able to go to a theater and see or hear themselves represented, and if they're not being represented properly, it just creates a lot of issues down the line, which is, again, why I've spoken with many producers. If it's not going to be represented properly, we're not going to make the movie. So,
And I love that. I mean, that's really at the core of our foundation for NextFoundArtist, why we even started what we started, is because 75% of consumers don't feel represented in mainstream media. And so for the, casting to really embody and be authentic to those roles, it does allow for people to foster representation and belonging through the authentic storytelling. And I think that's so important to be able to give those opportunities to people who are like, hey, now I finally feel seen, I feel represented. But it also helps tell that story really, really, more aligned and authentically, because they're part of the community, to be able to know how to act, be able to know how to
Yeah,
feel.
absolutely.
And that comes out
Absolutely.
during the acting.
Yeah, I mean there's such a realness to that because a lot of people, if they really have experienced this life of what it is to be that character but in real life, you get such a more honest performance, I feel. And like I just really really wholeheartedly believe we cannot be doing this anymore, of not properly representing people on screen.
How important is formal acting education versus just like raw talent and presence?
It's not important. I really don't think so. And this is coming from somebody who I went through school for acting, and I had many years of acting training, and I really don't believe that it is important. I think the most important acting education you can get is being on a set. I think that you learn more being on a set with other people than you would in school, because nothing can prepare you for what it's like to do an overnight shoot. Like, nothing can prepare you for, you're going to be sitting and waiting around for like 7, 8 hours, and then you'll go shoot a scene for an hour, and then you'll be sitting around for 7 or 8 more hours.
And back
Um,
to back and back to
yeah,
back.
no,
Yeah.
it's like for myself, like, because I've been in the industry for a long time. That was the best acting school for me, was that. And nothing can prepare you for that really until you're there. And I mean, this was something we were meeting with an actor recently for a role, and this person has never acted in anything, and they were kind of trying to prepare him for this role, and they're like, yes, it's going to be kind of like this, and we're going to modify the set for you in these specific ways. And something that I spoke to him about then was, you know you may be scared because you've never done this before, but think of any actor ever. They all had this experience of never having done this before and then jumping into doing it. And so, like, don't be afraid of it, because if all these other people can do it, you can do it as well.
Yeah, and everyone started somewhere, right? So it's like all
Exactly.
part of the journey, and that's the most comforting thing, to just be like, I promise you, you're not alone. Like, everything that you're doing, someone else started exactly where you are. But it's just humans, right? Like, we all get into our head, and we're our biggest roadblocks in general.
I would say so. Yeah, I think the biggest roadblock to anybody is self-doubt and fear. And I think to go on to a set for the first time for any of these things, there's a lot of fear that surrounds that. Auditioning, there's a lot of fear that surrounds that. And I think the most important thing I would, put onto anybody is, everyone wants you to succeed. And I know that things can seem extremely scary, but at the end of the day, majority of people are in your corner, especially if you're going to be on a film set. Everybody is in your corner to succeed. And everybody also makes mistakes. Like, there are, I've seen all of these, like, compilation videos of, like, old actors from, like, the 30s and 40s in these iconic movies screwing up lines. And major actors have screwed up lines and done a million takes on sets. And so just know that, like, don't expect perfection. Perfection is not real. Nobody is perfect. And, like, it's also, like, sometimes, within mistakes, you get some of the best performances, because you get moments that are so real, that are just, you know, spontaneous. So I don't know, I think there is so much fear involved in a lot of this, and kind of limiting that fear is extremely helpful, I would say, and just knowing that it is okay to mess up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first pieces of advice that I ever gotten was that anytime that you're going in for a role, they want you to be that person, right?
Yeah,
So
no, that's so true. That is so true.
yeah, like they are like, okay, this is the person. So it's us who is like putting that roadblock, being like, okay, I'm not right for this role, but in reality, you're walking in and they're like, this person is it for the role.
Yeah, I mean, I've also had so many friends that have auditioned for things where they've been like, oh, I totally bombed that audition, and then gotten the role. Like, I think, yeah, just being kinder to yourself. I think that was the biggest piece of advice I was ever given as a young person, was be as kind to yourself as you are to other people. If you're always wanting people to succeed, you should want yourself to succeed as well. And at the end of the day, as you said, you know, I want anybody walking into a room to be the person, because then I get to solve the solution. Like, we have the answer to the film. The film gets to get made. We don't want these processes to be very, 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 very long. We want to be able to, you know, find them. So everybody wants whoever's walking into the room to succeed. And if they don't, they should not be in their position, because that is not okay. I've met some people like that, casting people who went into casting for the wrong reasons and are like really resentful, and I hate that. I think that that's so messed up, and people should not be going into this profession if they I guess if they like wanted to be an actor, didn't get to have that happen for themselves, and then are like resentful towards other people. I think that's like so screwed up.
Yeah, and you can totally feel that energy when you walk into. You're like, okay,
Oh,
this
yeah.
is, yeah, this is not for me, and that's okay, and that's totally okay if it's not for them, right?
Yeah.
So, how would you, speaking of success, like how would you even define success?
I think I've always had the same definition of success my whole life, and that's if I'm doing what I love and it makes me happy to be doing it. I think that there's a lot of pressure, I think, really put on young people these days, for specifically to become famous, or to have millions of followers, or to like blow up online, and having to do it younger, or having to be perfect looking, or whatever. Like, I think all of that is so stupid and really so arbitrary. I think that success is really finding the thing that you love and pursuing it, and pursuing it fully. And if, I don't know, I've seen so many people who they are, by, you know, a more general definition, successful, of maybe they have what's perceived as a good job. I think it's, you know, in the greater scheme of things, it's a thing of, you know, people will have a job that is deemed by society as being successful, but they themselves are so unhappy, and are so, you know, they spend years of their lives doing this thing that makes them so unhappy, for what? So they can have a lot of money, or when they're 60 be able to retire easily. I think that is not how anyone should live their life. I think that, you know, people should be living their life to their fullest potential, and finding what it is that makes them want to wake up in the morning. And I don't know. I think that's success, is is that, and should not be defined in likes or followers or fame or any of that.
How do you balance happiness and creative fulfillment with your career?
I I feel very creatively fulfilled right now, just because I think the projects I after like the Oscar season, I got sent a lot of films, and getting to go through all of these different films and getting to choose the ones that resonate with me. I think that's like a huge luxury for myself that I have, and like feel incredibly creatively fulfilled by these like really cool, interesting new stories. I think, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question properly, but
There's no right or wrong, so don't worry. Yeah.
okay.
And yeah, last but not least, like, what was your childhood dream and how does it fit into where you are now?
Oh man, I my ch- my childhood dream was I really wanted to be Christine Daae in The Phantom of the Opera. That was my childhood dream. And yeah, anybody that knew me when I was in like middle school or younger than that, I think I saw that movie when I was like 4 or 5 years old and was like, this is what I need to do with my life. I think, yeah, it was two things. I wanted to do that, and I wanted to work in film, because for me, in like all of the like best moments and all of like the darkest moments, I would turn to film, and would just kind of watch as much as I could. I wanted to, when I was younger, especially when I was like a freshman in high school, give myself my own like film schooling and watch like every single film I could find. So I feel like, unfortunately, I didn't get to, be Christine Daae in Phantom of the Opera.
There's still time.
I don't know if I still want to do that. Maybe for fun I'll like do something related to that at some point. But I think getting to work in film, which is what I always wanted to do, I feel like unbelievably blessed to get to do that. That's what that was like my dream for a very long time, to get to. I've gotten to work with some directors I looked up to since I was like a really, really young person. I've gotten to work on projects that are about people that I have totally like looked up to, and just, yeah, I feel like I get to really at this moment live the life that I always wanted to live, and get to do the thing that I always wanted to do. So
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Really
thank you so
appreciate your
much for
time.
having me.
Thanks for being you. And to everyone at home, always be you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Did you enjoy this week's journey? So do we. And don't forget to give us a follow on all of our other socials at NextFoundArtist. Also, head on over to our website, nextfoundartist.com, to find and watch independent films from your next favorite artist.